when you hear that the state average capacity reservoirs right now is running at 69%, 14% lower than it was last year. Um, does that bring a level of alarm or not yet?
So I would say not yet. Statewide, like you said, about 70% of capacity for our reservoir levels. It's actually about 6% higher than average for this times of year. So just hearing the average number doesn't concern me. There are a couple of other factors that have a lot of folks in the water community concerned.
Okay, that's probably something I should clarify because when it's 14% lower than last year, but still 6% higher than what we normally have. So it's like, okay, we're okay. And I think Kim said the word solid is what we're looking at. I don't know, is that a correct way to describe it?
Um, so I would say that sorry, just one sec. I'm just texting Kim. Um, she's not going to join us. So just to clarify. So I would say that when you look at the statewide average numbers, we are in a good place. We're above our average for this time. We're above our average for this time of year. And um, I'm going to turn off my notifications real quick. So if she
It
continues to
it
text
I was
me,
about to say it did look like you were distracted. So
yeah, let me just
good thing we have the
th-
power of editing.
well, that and do not disturb is
There
a
you go.
as
Yeah.
well. Okay, so let me
Uh,
start again.
That's
Thank
quite
you.
okay. But yeah, we're kind of along that line. It's just like, so that's why we're not necessarily really worried just yet. It's because, yeah, we're down 14% from last year, but that's because we had really good a couple of years ago. And so, but we are still up from where we are average wise this time of year.
That is right. The one thing I would say is that water is very localized, and so reservoirs depend on the source that comes to them and the amount of water and the way that they were designed. So some reservoirs store water for 1 to 2 years, have like a 1 to 2 year supply of water, while others have a lot longer. If you think of like Jordanelle has 3 to 5 years of storage in it. So when we look at the state average, we're doing good, but there are areas where we're seeing lower reservoir levels.
Well, let's talk about that. You said that there are areas of concern. What areas of concern are you seeing at a state level?
Yeah, there are some that like Paiute and Yuba are low in the 20% of capacity approximately right now. But those are also, different uses for irrigation and may have a shorter storage capacity. We've also seen Willard Bay decrease, but that is actually because of an infrastructure repair that they're doing on Willard. So that's not necessarily a supply thing. They had to reduce the amount of water stored there for an infrastructure repair at the dam.
Yeah, Jordan Clayton also talked to me about there are three basins that are between 20 and 30% of capacity, Upper Sevier, Beaver, and Sand Pitch. And he was like, okay, those are areas where he was concerned about. As a state, have you seen the numbers for those reservoirs, or what have you seen?
Yeah, so we are tracking those numbers, and there are areas, as I mentioned, that are lower than average, and so we are, trying to track those and concerned about those areas.
Okay. Now the other thing that he was talking about soil moisture, and he said we are at record lows. And that really has him concerned, especially for the runoff situation for next winter. That if we don't get enough moisture in the soil, then basically when the snow melts, a lot of it's just going to get sucked right back into the mountain dirt, and we won't get nearly as much water in the reservoirs. So, and it seems like that's something that nobody can do anything about. The state can't do anything about it. It's just like all you can do is just kind of sit and sit and worry. So as the state division goes, how worried are you about that?
That is a really big concern. We are in a very similar situation as we were in 2020, where we had a record, heat and dry summer with very little precipitation. And then we had these record dry soils going into the winter. And then even though we had just a below average winter, but it wasn't terrible, our runoff was really bad. So we have a recent example of that case, and it is concerning going into this winter, especially with the lack of precipitation and the record dry soils.
I mean, there's time to turn it around, but at the same time, who knows? That's one of those things where, I mean, maybe it's a little too soon to worry about, but it could be like the if the numbers stay where they are, if the dry weather keeps being dry weather, then yeah, we could face a pretty big hit when it comes to our water collection system, correct?
Yes, and I think that's why it's so important that today we start thinking about how we're using water and reduce the amount of water we're using. I see reservoirs as, they're our bank account. They store water during wet years to get us through dry periods. And so the more we can leave up there, the better we'll be, especially in the case if we have a continued dry spell and a poor runoff next year.
Okay. And the other thing that I was thinking, I have to, these are what we call the accountability questions, where it's not necessarily designed to be confrontational or anything like that, but it's one of those things where because you're the state division in charge of this, then it's kind of like we have to ask you, how are you responsibly taking care of? Did I just go even further red? Hold on. Anyway, well, okay, I'll just deal with that. But um, so water restrictions typically happen on a local level, but when, if ever, does the state have to jump in and say, you know what, our water situation is bad enough? Well, let me start that over again. Water restrictions typically happen on a local level, but does it ever get to a point where the state has to jump in and say, you know what, we need to have restrictions all across Utah?
So the governor has issued in the past executive orders issuing a drought declaration and recommending certain actions, not only by individual residents, business owners, institutional water users. And I think there's a lot of opportunities within that framework to notify people, kind of like a call to action that we need to reduce how much water we're using because of our drought concerns. And that's still managed at the local level. So we have very little ability to change that at this point. There would likely have to be some legislation that gave us more authorities to do things like that.
Are when does the state get to the point, do they ever recommend to the governor that, like, yeah, you need to actually think about doing executive orders when it comes to water restrictions? Does the state kind of get in his ear?
Yes, we do. We have a drought response committee, and the drought response committee met yesterday. We meet at least twice a year, whether we're in drought or not. And then we're in drought conditions, we meet more regularly. And this has representation from all different agencies. Drought has wide sweeping impacts, not only just to our water supplies, but you can imagine wildlife, wildfire, agriculture. So it has very widespread impacts. And so we're trying to meet to discuss and review the conditions. And so this is what we were doing yesterday. And then we are providing this information up to the governor.
Okay. All right, generally, that's all I can think of to ask. The last thing I can think of is uh, because we're not in dire straits just yet, you guys are not preparing to tell the governor, hey, look, make the restrictions. Are you at that point or not yet?
I don't think that we are today, but we're watching the situation closely and are concerned about the direction that we're headed with the low precipitation, warm temperatures, and those record dry soils.
Okay. Now that's all I can think of to ask you. Was there any other major point that you think I should have asked you that I did not?
I think the biggest thing is that we all, when we're facing these really big hardships regarding our drought conditions, we all need to band together and reduce how much water we're using and be able to be informed. And people can go to drought.utah.gov for more information.